Well, environmental activist and scientist and broadcaster David Suzuki joined us on the program yesterday, and we spoke with him about the current state of efforts to address climate change. Now, he told us that the elevation of economics and politics above science has brought the world to a critical point.
We have passed so many critical points in under the conditions that keep us alive. That is the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, the pH of the oceans, the amount of available fresh water, the nitrogen cycle. And we're still arguing about pipelines and whether we should leave stuff in the ground.
That is David Suzuki expanding on comments he made in an interview with iPolitics last week, where he said it is now too late to do much about climate change. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Seth Klein. He's the team lead and director of strategy at the Climate Emergency Unit and the author of A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. Good morning to you, Seth.
Hi, Stephen. Good to be with you.
Thank you for taking the time with us. Is it too late to be addressing climate change?
It's not too late. It's certainly not too late to address it. Many of us saw that headline from David, and it was no doubt jarring. It kind of grabbed you by the neck. David's a scientist, and he's speaking some basic truths. And my take upon reading that article is that I think David, like all of us who are awake to the climate crisis, especially someone like him who's been at it for years, are wrestling with despair and with the impact of Trump's election and with our own politics that simply haven't been rising to the challenge at the pitch and the pace required. What I hear is David trying to sound the alarm and to rouse us out of this collective stupor. And he is not wrong that when you look at the polls in Canada, what they tell us is that Canadians are worried about this, but they are probably not as scared as they should be. But in terms of your question of is it too late, climate doesn't work like that. The expression we use when it comes to climate is that it's a matter of degrees. 10 years ago, when the world gathered at Paris and signed that agreement and committed to try to do everything we could collectively to keep temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, I think it's safe to say at this point we have lost that. And we can't be nonchalant about that. When that treaty was signed 10 years ago, the rallying cry from countries, particularly in the global south, South Pacific island countries, was 1.5 to stay alive. This is existential for them. But the point when we say it's a matter of degrees is that just because we have lost on 1.5 doesn't mean we've lost on 2, doesn't mean we've lost on 3 degrees. And that makes a big difference.
Well, yeah, right, but it was 1.5 to stay alive. The alternative being anything above 1.5 was, going to start to be fatal. And, we've seen climate-related disasters, many that have proved fatal, some of them to do with extremely high temperatures and some of them very close to home.
That's right. Let me try to answer your question this way, Stephen. I cut my teeth politically as a teenager in the 1980s in the peace and disarmament movement when the world faced a different existential threat around the threat of nuclear war. So that was a similar kind of threat, but it operated differently. It either would or wouldn't happen. Climate doesn't work that way. That's why I say it's a matter of degrees. The climate crisis isn't some threat in the future. As you just said, it's here, it's now. It is assaulting the people and places we love. And with each incremental increase in temperature, it will have devastating impacts on that many more people and that many more places. But it's equally true that whenever we do everything that we can to prevent the next incremental increase in temperature, we're saving that many people and that many places that we love. And to not do that is obscene.
But are we doing those things right now? As you know, politically and economically, it's about exploiting all of the resources that are buried in the ground in Canada, whether those are minerals, whether those are oil, bitumen, natural gas, whatever they are, don't leave it in the ground. It's worth billions and billions of dollars. Canada needs to become independent and move away from being reliant on the United States. With that, we have the science, we have the warnings, we have the real-life stories of fires and floods and disasters. So why are humans still prepared to increase global emissions in the face of all of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to answer the first part of your question, we are clearly not doing everything that we can and should be doing. We do not have climate policies at any level of government at this point, municipally, provincially, federally, that are aligned with what science says we have to do. And I would actually say that our climate plans, federally, provincially, municipally, right now, are a bit of a shambles. And that we're getting leadership that's kind of approaching this like a bunch of surrender monkeys, walking back from their climate plans. The plans are riddled with incoherence, as you say, when it comes to fossil fuel infrastructure, walking away from carbon pricing, but not replacing it with anything, walking away from spending commitments. They sound like they're going to be walking away from zero emission vehicle mandates. So we are in trouble and not doing what we can and should be, particularly in Canada, I should say, because this is the thing about the moment in which we find ourselves. And this is going to be true, Stephen, I think, for the next number of years, is that we are going to witness a world in which we are both losing and winning simultaneously. So at the same time as we're going to see an escalation of the kind of extreme events that you just mentioned. In fact, even if we did everything perfectly starting tomorrow, we would continue to see for a time
Right,
an increase
that
in those
carbon is
extreme
already in the
events.
atmosphere.
That's right. Some of it's already baked in. But at the same time, we're also seeing more hopeful trends, particularly outside Canada. China looks to have peaked its emissions years ahead of schedule. And while in Canada, we've only just barely started to bend the curve on carbon emissions, much of Europe is frankly kicking our butts. In Norway, here we are rethinking our vehicle mandates. In Norway, as of this year, 97% of new vehicles are zero emission. In the UK, the home of the Industrial Revolution, not only have they managed to dramatically reduce their emissions right now are lower than at any time since before the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s. And renewable energy adaptation is exploding globally. So we're going to be living in a period where we're going to start to land a bunch of these wins at the same time as things are harder. And that's hard to mobilize people when they're experiencing losses at the same time as we're trying to get everyone to do what's needed.
Seth, we're going to have to leave it there this morning. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care. That's Seth Klein, the team lead and director of strategy at the Climate Emergency Unit, author of A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. You can listen back to our interview with David Suzuki, by the way, the one that sparked all of this. That's on our CBC Listen app.